first, the big warning today about where we're going with this race politics. A dangerous and deceitful speech that Senator Lidia Thorpe gave today to applauding journalists at the National Press Club. A speech which had me agreeing with just this line.
No more shying away from the brutal past and ongoing colonial violence. Truth is a sign of maturity.
Yes, it is time for truth at last, because our fear of telling the truth is exactly why a racist demagogue like Thorpe gets so much support for her messages that she's even a senator in our federal parliament and leading a movement now for what she calls black sovereignty, what I'd call a form of apartheid in this country. So why don't we check the truth of just some of what Thorpe said today and check it in a way you will see nowhere else? Now, the story Thorpe told was that Aborigines lived in harmony until wicked whites came and slaughtered most of them. She said racist whites were even now still building their wealth by locking up Aborigines and stealing their children. And the solution, she said, was to give back even more Aboriginal land to let Aborigines govern themselves. And not one journalist at the club challenged a syllable of that inflammatory fantasy. But I now will. I'll start with this part of a story which was meant to excite Aboriginal anger.
My mob, Gunditjmara and Djapurrung, my grandmother's country, had 70 clans living in peace and harmony pre-colonisation.
In fact, Aboriginal warfare was so horrific that historian Geoffrey Blaney estimates the death rate in some areas, only some areas, that he says, and I'm quoting, was nearly 6 times that of the United States of World War II. Some might disagree. That's his stat. Runaway convict William Buckley, who lived with Aborigines in Victoria for 3 decades, described repeated and brutal warfare between tribes, including cannibalism. You should read what he saw. What's more, the ABC, in a recent broadcast for children, even got Aboriginal men to demonstrate fighting with traditional sticks and shields. And the point there is that Aborigines wouldn't have needed Aboriginal shields unless they made a habit of fighting Aboriginal men. You don't need shields if you're hunting kangaroos. And here's another Thorpe claim today.
On my grandfather's country, Gunai country, you call it Lakes Entrance or the Gippsland Lakes or the 90 Mile Beach when you go on your holidays. It was a sport to shoot blacks. A sport to shoot blacks. My people.
In fact, whites could, and occasionally did, get hanged for murdering Aborigines. The idea that they could just go out on weekends and kill for sport is totally false. Then there was this recklessly dangerous claim, which if anyone took seriously, would expose even more Aboriginal women and children to danger.
The frontier wars have never ended. Our people are still rounded up and locked into cages at the highest rates in the entire world. That's something to be proud of, right? Our children are still being snatched away and taken from country. This is the continued cultural genocide of our people.
In fact, one big reason so many Aboriginal men are jailed is that there is so much violence. So much that the Indigenous Australians Minister, Linda Burney, had to release a new plan today to tackle exactly that. It's so bad that Indigenous women are 34 times more likely to be hospitalised because of violence. As for Aboriginal children, they are more likely to be removed because they are more likely to be abused or neglected. So if you stop removing those children, what do you think will happen to them? Now, this is the blindness of a race bait who wants to insist that whites are evil and blinds herself to anything wrong in Aboriginal communities. In fact, look back far enough, you'll find worse in what she calls peace and harmony of traditional Aboriginal culture. 19th century observers such as Reverend George Taplin reported a third of Aboriginal children were killed because they were a burden. Anthropologist Peter Sutton described children in Northern Australia undergoing cruelling from adults, that's teasing or hurting a small child, to stir them into rage and retaliation. Of course, that's an historical account and can't be verified today. Now, Thorpe then accused white Australians of getting rich by robbing Aborigines.
We want to share some of what you have in your privilege from your, what you inherit. You know, think about your inheritance. Where'd it come from? Our blood and our misery.
Thanks very much.
In fact, the wealth of Australia comes largely from Western ingenuity and sweat. For instance, iron ore and coal was always in the ground here, right under our feet, even before Aborigines came here, and only got dug out and turned into wealth after the British came. Western civilization. Until then, those minerals were worthless. And then Thorpe's fantasy solution: give more land, give more self-government, and give more money.
Our people have never ceded sovereignty. We have never given up our right to manage our own lands and our own people. This land doesn't belong to the Crown. Come on. It never has. And it should be handed back. There is a lot of money owed to First Peoples. I mean, look at the resources that have been extracted over 200 years.
Reality check. Just look at the massive royalties paid already. Look at the billions of dollars of government money as well, twice as much per head that it's spent on other Australians. You look at the land that's been granted, that's the parts in shades of green, land that's held under native title claims. Has any of that fixed Aboriginal poverty, Aboriginal dysfunction? So here is one hard truth that we do need to face. Handouts won't end poverty, or that have ended it already. Try study and hard work instead, because that's already worked for so many Aborigines I know. Try that and it should work for the rest.